And I have to ask you this again, just for completeness. You were wearing your identification, that you were GCOM commissioner.
The badge that I described earlier on, I had it on a lanyard around my neck.
While you were kept outside of the building by the police ranks, did you see any GCOM official?
I did.
Who did you see?
There were several clerks and drivers, clerks who I saw working previously with returning officer Mingo, and drivers attached to GCOM and GCOM vehicles traversing in and out the rear entrance of the GCOM building, of the Ashman's building.
So these persons had access to the building and you as the commissioner did not?
Correct.
Was there any indication by any party that they had a request for recount?
Yes, while there,
Yes.
I observed Charles Ramson, Jr., counting agent of the People's Progressive Party Civic. I saw Mr. Lennox Schumann, the presidential candidate of the Liberty and Justice Party, and I also saw Mr. Nigel Hines, a representative of the Change Guyana Party, present.
May I, Mr. Gunraj, we're speaking here of the 6th of March.
The 6th of March, yes.
You said at about 8:30 you returned to the Ashman's building.
Yes, sir.
And you went there in the event of any party wishing a recount.
Yes, sir.
Now, that was something that ought reasonably to have been anticipated by any GCOM commission.
Yes, sir.
The possibility of a recount.
It was catered for a law. So we were.
It ought to have been, it could have been anticipated given the fact that it was provided for by law. It was something any GCOM commissioner could have anticipated.
Yes, sir.
But the building was locked.
Tightly so.
Are you aware that GCOM took a decision to secure that building and to lock its commissioners out?
The commission took no such decision, sir.
Thank you.
So in fact, when you were not the only commissioner there that morning. Commissioner Robeson Ben was also there.
He was.
And had he too been excluded from the building?
Yes, he was.
Shortly before midday, did anyone from GCOM come to where people were gathered outside the building?
We were informed by ranks of the police that GCOM officials would allow specific persons into the building.
Do you know where they got that information from, which they were
The police
communicating to
officers?
you? Yes.
I believe that someone of the GCOM officials communicated that to the police because we saw them speaking to each other before the police spoke to us.
When you say GCOM officials, what do you mean? The CEO, DCO, who?
One of the clerks that I referred to earlier, who was working with Mr. Mingo.
You know, Mr. Gunraj, you can't be sure that that was what the clerk was conveying to the police.
That is true. That is true, Chair.
Right.
But, you know, Mr. Gunraj, let me ask you this. A GCOM staff member told you that GCOM will accept requests for a recount. Can you show the gentleman paragraph 45 of his statement? He's at a disadvantage because there is so much information in his statement.
If the commission has no objection, might he just keep it on?
He should. I don't have a
Because
problem with that,
instead of us
It's his
having to
statement.
pass it all the time, and he could just put it down and
Thank
refer to it.
There you go. 45. You see that?
Yes, sir.
Now, the impression conveyed to me is that this is a substantial procedural issue. The issue of a recount is a substantial procedural issue. And this GCOM staff member, what designation did this person have, if you know?
As best as I can recall, sir, it was a clerk to the returning officer,
A clerk employed in the secretariat.
in the returning officer's office.
Well, that seems to me so loose an arrangement by GCOM. That the clerk is communicating with the commissioner, will you take recounts? What kind of system is this?
Commissioner, as ridiculous as it appears,
That's what it
that
was.
is exactly what happened.
Okay.
Do you know the name of that clerk?
I don't recall the name of the people.
But do you accept that what you say in paragraph 45 is correct? That just before midday, a GCOM staff member informed you and others there that GCOM will accept requests for recount?
That is so.
And you said you had seen Charles Ransom Jr. and Ramson, I beg your pardon, Ramson Jr. and Lennox Schumann waiting to submit such requests?
Yes.
Now, after this, did you attempt to have a meeting of the commissioners convened?
Yes, I did.
And did you have any success with that?
No, I did not.
Well, can you expand a little bit? Tell us how this attempt was effective.
So, Commissioner, a commission meeting can only be summoned by the chairman. As a consequence, any request for a meeting has to be channeled to the chairman. For a commission meeting to be held, there must be a quorum. And a quorum, as per the Constitution, for the Guyana Elections Commission are 2 members from each side and the chair. So a minimum of 5 persons being present to form a quorum for the meeting.
Well, let's go step by step. Given the explanation so far from you, it seems to me that the first step is to get the chairperson to summon a meeting.
Correct, sir.
Yes, well, were you able to do that? Because there's no point in telling us about a quorum if you can't get a meeting.
The reason, sir, for detailing the step is because my only point of contact would have been to make the request for a meeting to the chairman.
Correct.
As to the reasons why the meeting was not held, either whether there was no she couldn't muster a quorum or it didn't move forward, that would be, of course, speculating. But I made several requests to have a meeting called, none of which, and we had no meetings.
You made these requests of the chairman
Yes, sir.
by speaking to the chairman directly.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And I take it the chairman was not avoiding your calls. You were able to reach her.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Now, after this, there were court proceedings and so on, and the Chief Justice made a ruling, gave a ruling.
Yes, she did.
And was the chair, the GCOM chair, able to convene a meeting subsequently?
I believe the court ruled on Wednesday, and the chairman scheduled a meeting. That would have been Wednesday, the 13th, the 11th of March. And the chairman scheduled a meeting for the morning of the 12th of March 2020 at GCOM headquarters, High Street.
That's at Kingston.
Yes.
And while you were at that meeting, did you receive certain information?
Yes, I did.
What did you then do?
The meeting had not yet started, and upon receipt of that information, I immediately left High Street, Kingston, and proceeded to the Ashmans building.
Now let me step back a little bit. Now, I referred you to court proceedings and the Chief Justice giving a ruling. I take it you knew what that ruling was.
Yes, I knew.
And I take it, is this what prompted you to then go to Ashman's building?
Information I received is that the recount exercise was scheduled to recommence at the Ashman's building. That is what caused me to proceed to the Ashman's building with such haste.
When you got there, what occurred?
By now, the norm was to fight to get through barricades.
The norm for whom?
For myself.
You're wearing your identification and so on as a commissioner still?
Yes. I was wearing my identification as a commissioner. I proceeded to the
Mr. Gunrad, so that you don't wander away from the statement that is in evidence, look at paragraph 40.
Yes.
The narrative would flow smoothly if you stay with what you have.
Guided, sir. So I proceeded. What had become the norm was to fight to get through barricades. A GCOM staffer who at that point, I don't recall his name up to today, and I wish I did, was waving a list of who, the source of that list I am not aware of, but of persons who could and could not, first of all, pass the barricades and then enter the building. And the barricades were several yards away, hundreds of yards away from the building, entrance to the building.
Were you eventually allowed to enter?
Eventually, I was allowed to enter the building.
So before we get to eventually, do I understand that you were not on the list that the GCOM staffer was waiving?
I don't know whether I was on the list, but
Did the police allow you to enter?
The police did not allow me to enter, and it was only after an exchange between myself, the police, and this GCOM staffer that I was allowed to pass the barricades.
So, before we leave this issue, you were attempting to enter or to go past the barricade. A GCOM staffer produced the list. The inference is, if you're not being allowed, you're not on the list.
Yes, sir.
Good. This is a junior GCOM staffer?
Well, he has to be, because the commissioners are at the apex of the GCOM staff structure.
You were wearing your badge?
I was, sir.
You identified yourself to the police. I'm not finished, you're ready to answer. Did you identify yourself to the police as a commissioner of GCOM?
Yes, sir.
And the staffer said, no, you're not on the list.
Yes.
You can't come.
Yes, sir.
I see. Thank you.
When you were eventually allowed to enter and you got into Ashman's building, did you see the CEO first of all?
No, I did not.
Did you see the DCEO?
I did.
And did you see the returning officer?
I did.
Tell me very briefly what was happening.
The meeting, there were chairs set up in the tabulation room, the RO's office, in an entirely different configuration than was previously there. The documents that this is the first time I'm going back into this room since I was put out.
Yes.
None of the documents that I last saw there was in the room. And there were several party agents who were questioning the process that will be employed and were making requests in keeping with the ruling of the Chief Justice in relation to the procedure that ought to be followed.
So party agents were asking questions of whom?
Of the returning officer.
And was he responding to these questions?
The first or second questions he responded to, and then there came a point in time when he refused to engage further or answer any more questions, and in fact called off the process.
Okay. When he called it off, did he give an indication as to when it would resume?
He said that the relevant parties, the relevant persons, will be notified as to when it will be resumed.
Is it correct, sir, that the next day the process resumed at Ashman's building?
It did.
Were you there when it resumed?
I was. Excuse me. Excuse me.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And which part of Ashman's building it resumed in?
It was not in the tabulation room. It was in a different part of the ground floor that was previously earmarked as the media center.
We had agreed earlier that the law says that the verification process involves comparison of SOPs with SOPs. Was that happening?
No, it was not.
And was the RO conducting the process? Well, was he engaged in a process?
Yes, he was.
And that process did not include the verification of SOPs with SOPs?
Correct.
And Mr. Gunrad, that process that Ms. Cho is inquiring about, verification of SOPs from SOPs, was that part of the reasoning, or rather a recommendation of the Chief Justice in the decision you told us about just now?
Yes, it was, sir.
Yeah.
While you were there, did you see a marshal of the court?
I did.
And what happened?
A marshal of the court attempted to serve documents on the returning officer.
Was the marshal successful in so doing?
Eventually. Prior to successfully doing so, he was prevented from even entering the area and accessing the returning officer upon whom he had to serve the document.
Well, how do you know that?
I was standing there. I saw him being prevented by GCOM staff and security. In fact, I intervened as an officer of the court and explained to the security persons that these are marshals of the Supreme Court who have certain rights and who are clothed with certain authority to effect certain.
Sure, but GCOM security, who? By who? Well,
There
who
was
are you talking about?
There was GCOM security and there was police ranks also present.
Can you remember the names of any of the GCOM security detail?
The same gentleman waving the list earlier on, he was also present.
Then you don't know his name?
For the love of me, I can't remember, and I really hope that I would remember it before I
Was he
finish.
GCOM security, you say?
He was a person employed by GCOM.
Well, not necessarily GCOM security. Because
Commissioner, to tell you his exact designation
so,
would be difficult.
yeah.
I'm sure it's somewhere in there. But
What I'm saying is that you cannot say with any degree of certainty that he was security attached when employed with GCOM. You cannot say that.
I can say with certainty that he was not employed as a security person.
Alright, fine.
When the RO was served and you realized that he was being summoned to court, did you also go to court?
I did.
You attended the court hearing
I did.
and you knew what took place at the proceedings.
Yes, I do.
Then later that day, both you and the RO returned to Ashman's building,
I
correct?
did.
And when you got there, can you tell us what, if anything, the RO said to the persons there?
When I got there, this is back to Ashman's. The RO. Would you have permission?
Yeah, sure. If you want to refresh your memory, look at paragraph 52.
Yes. When we returned to Ashman's building, the RO informed the persons who were part of the tabulation process that he will inform them when the process will resume.
And did you later receive notification of when that process would be resumed?
Yes, I received notification that that process will resume at GCOM headquarters, High Street, Kingston, later that afternoon.
So then I have one. Is any reason given why the process was being moved from Ashman's building to GCOM headquarters?
No, Commissioner. None was given.
And had, to the best of your knowledge, had the commission been consulted about the change of the venue?
The commission was not consulted.
Did you go then to GCOM headquarters at Kingston?
Yes, I did.
Tell me what you saw when you got there.
When I got to GCOM headquarters, pardon my ad nauseum statement, the usual barricade song and dance had resumed. It took difficulty, in fact on this occasion, it took more difficulty in navigating the barricades because outside of the barricades there were large throngs of protesters wearing paraphernalia of one particular political party. Once I had navigated those barriers and gotten in, I went into the GCOM compound, and under a shed in the compound, I observed the RO had set up a brown cardboard background with what appeared to be a dirty bedsheet strung over it. And then there was a projector set up with projecting, and they were testing the projections onto that.
I have to ask you this. Would you as a commissioner in any circumstance have approved that kind of arrangement for the verification of election results?
Absolutely not.
Did you know beforehand that this was the arrangement that was going to be made at Kingston.
I did not.
So having seen this arrangement when you got there, what did you do?
I objected to the returning officer.
What is his reply?
He proceeded notwithstanding my objection.
Sure.
Mr. Conrad, I am aware that polling places are published in the newspaper, polling places. I'm not sure if there is a publication in the Gazette, the official Gazette. But I know the newspapers in the run-up to election carries publications to the advice of to the public of polling stations in particular polling divisions.
Yes, sir.
Correct. Places of tabulation and verification, are those also advertised?
The places of tabulation and verification is the office of the returning officer. In this case, in the case of District 4, the office of the returning officer, as was gazetted, was Ashman's Building, High and Hatfield Street.
So the office of the returning officer is published in the official gazette.
Yes, sir.
GCOM headquarters in Kingston was not the address for the office of the returning officer for Region 4.
Correct, sir. And that was part of my objections raised with the returning officer, which he ignored and proceeded.
So tell me, in the normal course of things, if the place of verification is to be changed, can the returning officer take that decision unilaterally?
No, sir.
Would that need to be a commission decision?
Yes, sir.
Or could that be an administrative decision made by the chief elections officer?
No, it had to have been a commission decision because it is a commission decision that settled on Ashman's Building as to be the returning office of the returning officer for District 4.
Okay. There could not have been anything unreasonable if the chief elections officer was satisfied for any good reason that there needed to be a shift in the verification exercise from the Ashman's Building to GCOM headquarters at Kingston. There would be nothing unreasonable for him to make such a recommendation for a quick decision from GCOM.
Of course not, sir.
Was that done?
It was not done.
Right.
When you said you protested to the RO, did he take you on at all?
No, he did not. He proceeded.
And was there any other commissioner there?
I can for certain say that Commissioner Robeson Ben was there.
And did he also raise any issue with the RO?
He raised similar issues. In fact, he joined me in raising the issues that I was raising.
And what was the RO's response to
His
it?
response was a similar one.
Having not received a response, what did you do?
I left the GCOM compound and proceeded out of the compound to the On the outskirts of the compound, there was a media contingent gathered, and I proceeded to address the media.
While you were addressing the media, do you recall whether the police did anything? Would you like to refresh your memory?
I can, if
Paragraph 54.
Thank you. After I completed addressing the media, I remained within the barricades that were placed outside of GCOM. There was one barricade at High and Barak Streets at one corner, and then there were barricades at High and I believe that's Lamaha or Quad Street. And there were police ranks within those barricades, and there were other persons, including the media and so on, other persons with the party agents, etc., that were within those barricades. As I remained out there, I observed that the police removed the barricades that were at High and Barak Streets, thereby allowing the protesters that I referred to earlier on to come into the area that we were in.
And you say that you were threatened by the protesters?
Yes, I was.
What threats did you receive?
The protesters were shouting, if I'm allowed to say what they were shouting. They were shouting, Granger, Granger, Granger.
No, well, that's not a threat.
And
What threats did you receive?
And they specifically, in fact, one person specifically said to the group of us gathered there, including the media, if you know what is good for yourself, you all should leave.
So you were threatened, well, they told you to leave. It was an instruction to leave.
A veiled threat.
I wouldn't consider it an instruction, but eventually we left.
And when the protesters had come in to closer to where you were, what was the closest they got to you?
There was nothing preventing them from coming into contact with me.
And about how many of them were there, would you say?
Several scores of persons.
You left, and did you return to the building sometime later?
I returned sometime later that evening.
Okay. Now I want to ask you, are you familiar? Sorry.
So could we arise and look at you for a few minutes?
Certainly.